You've viewed a very special episode of something. Odds on that it probably came from a family sitcom of the sort. They either hit the nail on the head, like when Webster found out that his substitute teacher was a pedophile in the show of the same name, or depict the social issue the producers are going against so poorly that it just derails into being laughably cheesy. That god-awful Full House episode where one of the Tanner kids starved herself to look good in a swimsuit. Does it ring a bell? Those are what I'm talking about. The practice was rarely done in cartoons when it boomed in popularity, but have you ever seen one in Japanese animation? I just finished a show that apparently did, and it was called Recon, a slice-of-life horror comedy based on the manga of the same name. The plot centers around Hibiki Amami, a high school girl who can contact ghosts and, unlike everyone else in her city, has the power to see them without the use of a camera. Alongside the ghosts she meets, Amami has a handful of human friends as well, such as Inoue, a tsundere who runs counter to occultism but deeply cares for her, Esumi, an ex-gangster with a rugged personality, Uehara, a blogger with a lot to talk about on her social media regarding ghosts, etc. Sometime before the 2020s came in, I suddenly got the idea to dive into more than just anime stuff. Someone I knew during my 10th grade year showed me PetiteTube, a tool that can pull up videos that have hardly been watched at all. We had a good laugh with some of the videos we found, some barely scratching 10 watchers. One morning, before I left for another day of school, I thought I'd see what I could dig up to kill time. Most of the refreshes didn't give me anything all too special. Old sports recordings, religious ceremonies, Bollywood clips. But one refresh actually captured my interest. A Bandicam recording that I cannot remember the name of, as it was full of random numbers in addition to the date it was uploaded. For a full unclaimed episode of an anime that I didn't realize at the time was for Recon. Now that I mention it, I'm unsure of whether or not I can call it an episode, as the length was much shorter, around half of its average 24-minute runtime. The video narrowly received a few views. No likes, no comments, and never turned up again after the one time I saw it. All I know now for certain is that it's still sitting on YouTube, unwatched, collecting dust somewhere. Instead of a funny cold open or introduction, a few establishing shots of a neighborhood faded in, followed by Amami in her school uniform, setting forth to Hanazuka High and waving goodbye to someone off-screen. Aside from the intro being utterly absent, no soundtrack was present either. Just tweeting birds and humming cicadas. On her way to school, a few ghosts she had interacted with in past episodes caught her eye, before vanishing in the next cut. We see Amami stepping into the classroom, expecting to see Inoue and everyone else having a conversation as usual. But virtually nobody spoke to each other, likely out of worry from the expressions they gave. The only student there who attempted to speak with the others was Yamada, the male friend of Amami's circle. Normally, he'd be struck with an object to shut him up, but they simply glared back as if they were too sickened to lay a finger on him. Even Ogawa, the most supportive girl Amami had ever met, hid her face behind a book, as though she were trying not to cry. Inoue sat near the opposite corner of the classroom, staring down at her desk with silent agony. All Amami could do was worriedly raise an eyebrow before the professor stepped in and called for attendance. Throughout the montage that came after, Inoue had the laziest, most uncaring attitude toward every activity she would be involved in. She cut her finger by accident in cooking class and had no reaction. Stood completely still during physical fitness. Everything about her wasn't right. Perturbed, Amami approached her during the lunch period to ask what was wrong. It took some convincing and unintentional coddling from Amami before her friend finally cracked. It was revealed that she witnessed a longtime family friend of hers pass away 2 days prior, in the middle of his apartment. Inoue and her parents paid him a visit after weeks of not doing so, and they found him collapsed, overdosing. But that has me confused over why no one wanted to communicate with her earlier. Maybe the coddling made her snap back because somebody in the classroom kept trying to pry information out? Amami opened her mouth, wanting to say something, anything to bring her some form of comfort after the tragedy, but her classmates' pleading eyes said otherwise. Just by looking into them, they begged her to leave Inoue-san alone. Gominasai, she sighed, making a zipping motion to her lips. The scene ends with the spirit of Inoue's grandmother floating next to her, stroking her hair to provide comfort, yet receiving no reaction much like the other scenes. This definitely isn't like her at all. Wouldn't she have been at least a little startled? Hours pass, and school is over for the day. On her way back home, she inspects the area she had last seen those ghosts in. Unlike in the beginning of the episode, the setting was empty and boring. Aside from the cat Ero Neko showing up to crack yet another perverted running gag, only to be completely brushed aside by Amami continuing to walk past him, the scene was wholly quiet. Halfway through her amble home, she heard the voice of a grown man nearby, calling for her attention. The recording sounded like it was done in a room that had no studio equipment, and by a voice actor struggling to keep up with the language they were dubbing, strangely enough. It had me questioning the probability of who this voice belonged to. Surprised, the girl swiftly turned around to see someone at her feet. A male ghost. One with square lens glasses and a build on the heavyset side. The man whimpered below his breath, holding his hands out in a cupped form. "Yobi no en desu ka?" Or, "Spare yen, ma'am?" Amami instantly panicked seeing his unkempt figure. The poor guy must have not eaten a crumb, much less had someone to speak to in a long time. Her hospitable instincts kick in, and she races home to get food for him to eat. He screams out, begging for her to wait. Within minutes, Amami arrives back, carrying piles of pressure-cooked nishime and curry. She staggers, nearly collapsing, but manages to place down everything she brought over with ease. She asks the man in a panicked tone, all while shoving a simmering bowl of fresh veggies and chicken into his chilly hands, why he'd be asking for money instead. The ghost starts off by introducing himself, and we come to find that his name is Masato, a 28-year-old man who lost his will to live mere days ago. He informs Amami of his medical conditions that are somehow continuing to span out in his afterlife, and when he was still alive, he'd visit a pharmacy to medicate himself. He also clarifies that in ghosthood, while no one can see him through the naked eye, he still can't bring himself to steal from these places just to help himself feel better. Upon being asked by his newfound friend what his conditions were, Masato refuses to elaborate, continuing to shovel nishime into his mouth. No matter the number of times Amami made it clear that she wouldn't judge him, and that she'd be more than happy to help in any way, he just fell silent. Ashamed he even discussed this with her to begin with. Nevertheless, the two had a pleasant conversation that ended with a wave goodbye, and Masato continuing to enjoy the food. A montage played, depicting Amami visiting the specific hallway he resided in every school day, leaving behind all sorts of offerings. A montage played, depicting Amami visiting that specific alleyway he resided in every school day, leaving behind all sorts of offerings. Their amity grew the more she dropped by, and Masato was indeed grateful. but he seemingly struggled to keep calm around her for whatever reason. His breaths were heavier, and he had a difficult time paying attention when she attempted to strike up a conversation. Half the time Amami came to Hanazuka High, she'd apologize for being so much as scarcely tardy and talk about what she had been doing to help Masato. While she didn't use his name out of respect, the things she said about him disturbed one student in particular. Inoue. The more she sat on the other side of the room to listen, the more familiar this person became. One day did not go as well as she hoped, however. It was a Friday morning, and Amami was just getting ready to check in on Masato with a fresh bowl of fried rice on standby. Like in the beginning, everything was quiet. No ghosts, children, or cars passing by. She smiled warmly, preparing her 5th greeting this week. When she arrived, expecting him to be restlessly waiting, Masato was instead pressed against the wall of the alley, limp. His breaths were slow as a snail, skin cold as ice. At first, she assumed he was having a panic attack and approached him to ask what was wrong. But then, she looked to her left, and her heart sank. On the ground laid a bottle of unlabeled pills, half empty, some still in his hand. Amami almost screamed, but immediately stifled herself to not irritate Masato any further. She desperately sputtered on repeat, "Daijoubu, ochitsuite." Or, "It's okay. Calm down." Her mind raced between thoughts of what the hell she was supposed to do. He couldn't die a second time, there was just no way for that to happen. But how could she help? Calling the paramedics wouldn't work because he's already dead. Inoue was going through a ton of mental stress, and she had no idea on how anyone else would handle the situation. She'd be called crazy if she screamed for help, and any passers-by saw nobody by her side. She had one option left: to sit there and comfort him until his consciousness came back. Nightfall eventually came. Inoue was trudging home shortly after visiting someone's grave late at night, reassuring herself that the ghost Amami had befriended is just some homeless man, and not who she thinks he is. The poor tsundere was so uneasy that she felt like she could pass out at any moment. She was then fully awakened by the stammering of Amami's father, pacing back and forth. He recognizes her uniform and, without hesitation, asks Inoue if she had seen Hibiki anywhere. Stuttering over her words, Inoue tells him that she never arrived at school. Her anxiety skyrocketed once she had been informed that Amami never returned home either. before being shown a text on his flip phone. Subtitled, "Punish me if you must, but I'll probably be back by tomorrow. I'm sorry, Dad. I love you." The scene switched to Inoue hurriedly spam-calling Esumi and Uehara, begging them to come help her search around. When they had arrived, both of them were tired out of their mind, but pissed over the thought of someone snatching her up. Uehara had a phone in hand, camera and flashlight on just in case she witnessed her in someone else's grasp. One aspect I noticed about Esumi in this part of the video is that she carried an object with her. A bokken, or wooden katana. Early on in the series, it was revealed that Esumi engaged in delinquent behavior and vigilantism to protect the weak and put down the strong, as she put it. One rescue mission had her beating down a gang of sexual harassers to save a girl they cornered. This is important. Remember this for later. Meanwhile, Amami sat in the alley, so tired that she could barely keep her head up. Her eyes darkened under the moonlight. Masato hugged her, still on edge, but a lot steadier and calmer than that morning. Suddenly he opened his mouth to whisper. What happened genuinely surprised me on my first and only watch, not just because it's quite a bombshell to me, but because it was done in a way that I've rarely ever seen happen in an anime. He spoke in English. Not English, may I remind you, with the Japanese accent sprinkled in. I mean, actual fluent English. Thank you. I was expecting Amami to say nothing back, but as if she knew exactly what he meant, she replied, her cheeks wet from her sobs. "Do itashimashite." Or, "It's my pleasure." The crying that followed was so loud that she unknowingly drew in the attention of Inoue and the others. Far off in the distance, Inoue and Esumi stood behind Uehara, catching the ghost on her phone. Assuming the worst, Uehara took several pictures, while Esumi just stood there, her grip tightening around her bokken. "I'm glad humans can be punched," echoed in her mind like a broken record. Inoue had it the worst, her face bearing nothing but heartbreak. That's when everyone approached the alleyway, Esumi being the first to storm forward with gritted teeth. The ex-delinquent certainly caught Masato's attention, but absurdly enough, she did not fight him off. All she could do was raise her weapon and spit threats at what others would see as air. Amami's cries came to a halt, and this was what had been greeted to Masato when his vision finally unblurred. the one he first locked eyes with being Inoue, even faltering her name, evidently feeling betrayed. The second being Uehara, her phone up and recording his every move. He stormed over to Uehara and snatched the phone from her hand, skimming through it with a twitching finger. To the others, minus Amami, they saw a phone floating in the air by some invisible force. Masato's eyes, however, were assaulted with image after image of him on a blog website, painted as a total monster. Comments were sickened, calling him all sorts of names. Tears welled up, and he switched his gaze over to the group, staring them down with a mug of bitter hate. Uehara's phone dropped screen first. The video would end with Masato running into the night fog, stumbling in his step. A close-up shot of Amami appeared, so tired that she couldn't bother chasing him down. Fatigued or not, though, she wasn't too exhausted to throw in an uncharacteristic scowl at the group before passing out. Geez, what's the matter? You can't sleep? Good. Stay tuned, pal. You're watching LafawndaPasta.